My famous psychologist presentation is on Sigmund Freud. About Sigmund Freud. Freud lived to 1856 to 1939. He lived in Vienna for most of his life. He studied medicine at the University of Vienna and later became a neurologist. Shortly after becoming a neurologist, he discovered his passion in psychology. Freud did a lot of clinical research and had published many scientific works throughout the years. Some of these works being Studies in Hysteria, 1895, The Interpretation of Dreams, 1900, and 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, 1905. Freud and psychoanalysis. Freud believed that events in one's childhood shape their adulthood. Freud's psychoanalytic theory is based on many principles, the most prominent of these principles being the id, the ego, and the superego, psychosexual development, dream interpretation, and free association. Freud also believed that mental illness was rooted in the unconscious mind. The id, the ego, and the superego. The id was the unconsciousness. Freud believed it contained everything that was inherited and present at birth, along with the primitive instincts. The ego was consciousness. It was responsible for controlling the id and its instincts, as well as responding to stimuli and achieving pleasure and avoiding displeasure. The superego's demands were controlled by the id. It represents the influence of other people and environmental factors such as racial, social, societal, and cultural happenings. The id was considered your primitive instincts. The superego was your moral and ethical feelings, and the ego was the balance between the two. Psychosexual development. Freud believed psychosexual development was necessary to be psychologically healthy. There are 5 stages. The first stage occurs from birth to the first year of age. It is the oral stage, the obsession with the mouth, and sucking and swallowing. So sucking and swallowing occurs with food tasting, and that associates with feeling full in an infant, which are pleasurable for them. The second stage occurs from 1 to 3 years of age, and that is the anal stage. It is from controlling bowel and bladder movements. They receive praise from their parents, and that in turn gives them pleasure. 3 to 6 years of age is the phallic stage. Children discover genital differences between a male and a female. 6 years of age through puberty is the latent stage. Sexual feelings become inactive, and social and societal values, as well as relationships outside of the family, are honed. Puberty through death is the genital stage. It's when maturing sexual interests occur and the welfare of others becomes a priority. Each stage is necessary in the id, the ego, and the superego formation. If all of these stages are completed, you will become a well-rounded adult, according to Freud. Next is dream interpretation. Freud considered dreams to be the road to unconsciousness. The ego's defenses are lowered, and repressed memories and emotions become present while dreaming. A major function of dreams was wish fulfillment. Dreams also protect us by using the idea of displacement. Displacement is substituting objects in dreams so that we as people do not feel wrong for believing those things. For example, Freud observed a man who had a dream about him killing a dog, but there was a woman in his life who he frequently referred to as a dog, and in his dream, Freud believed that displacement occurred to keep him from feeling guilty about his dream. Freud also concluded that you could not predict what symbols in dreams meant without understanding the person's circumstances. The last principle Freud had in his psychoanalytic theory was free association. It was one of Freud's methods employed in his psychoanalysis. patients were allowed to speak about anything they wanted to, and the analyst had to draw a conclusion based off what the patient said. Freud's influence to psychology. Freud is considered the founder of psychoanalysis and the psychodynamic approach to psychology. His data are what modern-day psychology theories and therapeutic techniques are based on. For example, free association in the idea of consciousness and unconsciousness. His work contributed to the understanding of personality, clinical psychology, and abnormal psychology. Freud is considered the father of psychology due to his extensive work in the field. Many of his ideas have been disproved, but he is still very important because he set the stage for other psychologists and their research to be heard. His work also helped introduce the idea that environmental factors contributed to one's mental illness, which eventually led to the idea of mental illness being caused by genetics and biological factors. Freud's scientific contribution. One of his most well-known cases is the case of Anna O., real name Bertha Pappenheim. The case of Anna O. Anna O. suffered from hysteria. Hysteria is a condition in which the patient exhibits physical symptoms such as paralysis, convulsions, hallucinations, or loss of speech without a physical cause. Her symptoms originated when caring for her sick father. She did not appear to have any anxiety about her illness, but when subject to psychoanalysis, her anxiety had been expressed. When the unconscious thoughts became conscious, her paralysis disappeared. Freud also had scientific cases and experiments, but they were hard to generalize because they were a case-by-case basis. His discovery of the idea of consciousness and unconsciousness, the theory of psychosexual development, the id, ego, and superego, as well as dream interpretation are all humongous discoveries in the field of psychology. Freud's successes and critiques. For his successes, his ideas are still a strong part of modern Western culture. His idea of free association is still used today in psychological treatments. He introduced the concept of psychotherapy, talk therapy, which is still used in psychological treatments today. Freud had many critiques. His ideas were considered very radical amongst his peers, as well as being considered very radical today. Due to clinical evidence, the principles based upon his cases are fundamentally flawed because they cannot be generalized. Free association is another thing that has been criticized because there are no controls in the case, so they are fundamentally flawed and it renders the whole case invalid. The patient's answers can be skewed by the analyst's questions as well. Why I chose Freud. I chose Freud because he had a huge impact on psychology as a whole. Although his ideas were considered radical and eventually proven to be somewhat incorrect, he is inspiring because he still did the research no matter what others had to say. He always pursued his passion.